All right, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me and see my slides?
Yes.
Great. It's really great to be here. Thank you, Debbie, for the invitation and organizing this conference, and Hank for the introduction. I will just say EPIC is a small think tank. We're based in DC nominally, but have folks all over and work on water equity issues in addition to conservation, markets, and biodiversity. And it's really my pleasure to just kick this off this morning with a kind of brief, I'd say, framing of how we can think about the water affordability challenge, some of the drivers of that challenge and potential solutions. And then other speakers today will dig into more of these as we go. So to start off, I wanted to distinguish between household affordability and system financial capacity as two concepts to hold while we're thinking about the moral imperative and the work to provide drinking water services to all people in the country. And so household affordability can be thought of as the ability of residents to pay for adequate service provision without undue hardship. And the value-based questions within there are, what is adequate? Is that 50 gallons a day per person? Is that 250 gallons a day per person? And what is undue hardship? When does the bill size create such a hardship that households, for example, that have to choose between paying their medical bills and paying their water bills, we'd consider that a hardship. But where we draw that line is a value-based decision. And there's different ways to measure household affordability. Traditionally, median household income has been used as a metric to get an estimate. We're moving away from that definition. And so now one way to think about household affordability is how many hours of labor at minimum wage do you have to work each month to pay your bill? And estimates suggest that between 10 to 30% of households spend more than 1 day of labor per month to pay their bill, which may then be unaffordable if they're also paying rent and food and medical bills and others. And when the bill is unaffordable, this can lead to financial strain and health consequences. So households would be charged late fees. In other cases, after a while, utilities will disconnect the service of households that aren't paying their bills, and they charge to disconnect and reconnect the services. So that leads to financial strain. And clearly, if you don't have access to water, as we know during this pandemic and at all times, then it's difficult or impossible to drink enough water to wash, to bathe, to clean your food, to cook. And so that has real serious adverse health consequences. Right, so then on the system side, we think about system financial capacity. The utilities that are providing water services also need to have enough resources to pay to deliver water that's in compliance with regulation. So it costs a lot of money to secure water from rivers and aquifers, to treat it and to pump it out to the households. And the water must be delivered at a certain quality. And so the system needs to have enough resources to pay for all of that. And these estimates are rough, but some suggest that 64% of water utilities do not generate sufficient revenue to cover their costs. They pay for all of these costs by collecting money from the customers that they serve. And many are not collecting enough revenue in order to maintain their quality of service. And when systems don't have enough money, then this can lead to charging more rates. So if they need to collect more revenue, they increase rates. That causes a household affordability challenge. They will reduce their investment in infrastructure, which can then lead to lower quality service. If you're not putting enough money into treatment or to the pipes, then the water might not be as high quality. Then you might fall out of compliance with the regulations on water quality, and it can lead to a large amount of debt. So another way around this is to take out a big debt to make these investments, but that can have fiscal stability consequences. And so just as a framing part, I think that we want to hold this dyad in our head when we're thinking about the causes and consequences of this problem. If systems raise their rates, then households may struggle to pay them. If customers are not generating enough revenue, then systems have trouble investing in their systems. And so we need a solution that holds both the household and the system level in mind when we're trying to address this problem. Right, so I wanted to now move into 3 underlying causes of the challenge. What is driving bills up and making it hard for households to pay and hard for systems to pay to provide water services, so on both sides. And the first underlying cause of this challenge is there's really high costs of providing water services. And this should be familiar with many members of the Sierra Club, but in the cost of water services are increasing because the water service provision sector is really fragmented. There's 50,000 systems in the US that are providing water, and they all incur some costs of hiring engineers, hiring operators, doing a billing system. That's costly. Climate change is making it more difficult to procure water. You can think of the drought in California as an example amongst many. There's more contamination also from climate change and changing demographic and land use. There's more stringent regulations, which increases treatment costs, and there's deteriorating infrastructure. We're not investing very much in our infrastructure. It's very old, and so getting that system to work costs more money. The second underlying cause is that we rely on local ratepayers. So as I said, the customers in the system pay for about 96% of the costs of running the system. And this is really different than other infrastructure in the United States. So highways and airports are largely paid for by the federal government. Water utilities receive very little money comparatively from the federal government. And so they're mainly relying on the customers in their service area. And that leads to this dynamic where some customers have limited resources to pay. So if you combine high costs with reliance on local ratepayers and limited resources to pay, you end up with this affordability challenge. And so at the individual level, people that are working minimum wage jobs or living on a fixed income or unemployed, seniors, people with disabilities, have less income to pay their water bills. And at a community level, when populations change, so if you have declining population, there's fewer customers around to pay their rates, or economic segregation. So this is showing that households in New Jersey between Trenton and Princeton have sorted, where low-income households tend to live in Trenton and higher-income households tend to live in Princeton. This is happening around the country. And therefore, there's just fewer resources in Trenton to pay for operating a water system well. Right. It's a bit dire, but now I'll just kind of outline some of the ways we can address these challenges. So what can local, state, and federal actors do to try to address the water affordability challenge? And utilities can do a lot. So the first thing that they can do is try to reduce their provision costs. We know that high costs are really driving this problem. And utilities can, in some cases, regionalize, so have fewer systems fewer small systems incurring those costs. There's historical legacies why there might be mistrust or some serious inequities that need to be addressed. So this is not a universal solution, but in some cases maybe. And they can adapt to new technologies. So if you put in better pipes or you're using better meters, you might change or change how you do your treatment. That can reduce costs. And then encouraging conservation. So if customers need less water, it'll cost less to procure and treat that. They also can change the amount that customers are charged. So utilities, and Alexander will definitely talk about some of the legal limits here, but how utilities charge their customers will then determine their bill. And so they can change their rate setting, which are what types of bills do which types of customers receive. That can do a lot to relieve affordability crises, and then also set up as a last line of resort an assistance program. And so if you are going to have some sort of rates where households like you and I are paying for our water, some customers will receive assistance. So just one quick slide on CAPS, customer assistance programs. These are, once the bill goes out at a certain level, some programs come through to provide assistance to those customers. So these can be things like bill discounts. So you receive a bill, say for $30 a month, but then if you qualify for the program, you only pay $15, something like that. Or it can change their rate structure. So the types of bills that certain customers receive are already lower and more affordable. And then the last thing I'll talk about is what the federal and state governments can do to help address this problem. And the two big solutions here are state and federal governments can help fund and finance water infrastructure, and then they can support these customer assistance programs. So just a little bit in this, we'll dig into later today on state revolving funds are the main federally sponsored program to invest in water infrastructure. And this program provides low interest loans and some grants to community water systems and other borrowers. And there's a program both to support water quality on the clean water side and drinking water. And how the program works is Congress sets aside a certain amount of money for what is called a capitalization grant, but that's just about $5 billion a year. It may really increase with the infrastructure bill, is appropriated by Congress. That money goes to the EPA. The EPA sends it out to states. States match that money. That's what you see in teal here. They add about 20% to the money they receive from Congress, and then they loan out the money. And as communities repay them money, those repayments revolve back, that's the name, and can be reloaned. And so you'll see over time that revolving part, the repayments from principal and interest, is a larger part of the program. And so this is a really successful, very popular program that is doing a lot to help systems invest in their water infrastructure. And that can take away some of the costs from that we rely on local ratepayers, and also address some of those underlying causes of the issue. There's some room for improvement in this program. So EPIC did an analysis that shows that only about 7% of drinking water systems have received support through this program on the drinking water side in the last decade. And so from an equity standpoint, states are doing a lot to try to push this money out the door to the communities that need them most. And there could be some further policy reforms and additional practices to do more to reach the communities that really need the funds. And that will help with the affordability issue. With that, I'll just say thank you very much for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Go ahead, Hank. Okay, so I'm reviewing the chat and I am looking to see if there are any questions. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask verbally? If you do, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. No? Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat, so Hank, feel free to introduce our next speaker.